Hi, welcome to this presentation about the Great Depression. This is going to be divided into 4 parts. Part 1 will be explaining what the Great Depression is and what caused it. Part 2 is about the effects of the Great Depression. Part 3 is about what solutions we could have done to stop it or prevent it in the future. And Part 4 will be concluding thoughts. So what was the Great Depression and how did it start? The Great Depression was a severe economic downturn that lasted about a decade from 1929 to 1939. The Great Depression caused massive unemployment, declines in output, and acute deflation. While most of its effects were in the United States, it actually had some residual effects to countries all over the world. The Depression began with low aggregate demand, or in other words, a strong decline in spending. The initial decline started with the stock market crash of 1929. The 1920s were a very prosperous decade, but not too exceptional. However, the stock prices had risen fourfold from 1921 to 1929. That led the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates in hopes of slowing the rapid rise in stocks. Towards the end of 1929, U.S. stock prices reached levels that just could not be justified by reasonable anticipations of future earnings. So this made many investors lose confidence in the stock market and basically made the stock market bubble burst. On Black Friday, many people began to panic sell. There was widespread banking panics throughout the 1930s due to many depositors simultaneously losing confidence in the solvency of banks and taking out cash from all of the banks. This led to a decline in production from manufacturers. As the economy slowed down, unemployment rose and led to a decline in consumer confidence. Both investors and consumers felt pessimistic about the recession and began to spend less and save more money. This means that the aggregate demand will be too low to have sufficient employment of available resources. Basically, the Great Depression can be summed up as a long, stubborn decade of low aggregate expenditures. But what were the effects of the Depression? The Great Depression had massive effects on social, economic, and overall living in America. During the first 5 years of the Depression, the economy shrunk by 50%. The GDP shrunk from $105 billion in 1929 to just $57.2 billion in 1933. Unemployment rose from 4.2% in 1928 to almost 25% in 1933. A third of the nation's banks just completely failed. Politically, many people began to doubt unfettered capitalism, and this resulted in FDR winning the presidency for his Keynesian economic policies. Socially, the Dust Bowl drought destroyed farming and agriculture in the Midwest. Along with that, people were just, generally depressed. Many people didn't have the money to spend on things that made them happy, like vacation or entertainment. People couldn't go out and see a play or watch a movie or listen to music. And that led to kind of low morale on top of the fact that everybody was broke for the most part. That also meant that people in the entertainment industry were having a really hard time. But we were able to get through it, and part of that was due to the election of FDR. He delivered the famous speech, including the quote, "So, first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." So he created the New Deal. This created many new job programs and 3 flagship relief agencies: the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Works Progress Administration, and the Public Works Administration. This created many new jobs and led to less unemployment and better economic efficiency. Estimates vary, but by 1937, unemployment fell from around 25% to only about 14%. Along with that, 3 landmark reforms reshaped banking and finance. The Glass-Steagall Banking Act separated commercial banking from investment banking, ending depositors' funds from being used as stock speculations. This created the FDIC to ensure banking deposits. Along with that, there were the Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange of 1934, which created the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC. The New Deal also brought fiscal stimulus and economic recovery programs. This was due to FDR's Keynesian as opposed to monetaristic policies and beliefs. Now, how could the Great Depression have maybe been avoided, and what should we do in the future? So in the 1950s, Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz began compiling historical data on monetary variables for their 1963 book, A Monetary History of the United States. After a much closer look, they concluded that the popping of the bubble, or the stock market crash of 1929, wasn't the real cause of the Great Depression. In fact, they believed that the U.S. economy could have easily recovered, and quickly recovered after the crash, had the Fed not created a series of disastrous policies after it. Stuff it under their bed, rather than trust it into other banks, the money supply shrinks. Likewise, when banks lose reserve due to bank runs, the economy experiences a multiple contraction of deposits. The crash made it more difficult for businesses to repay their loans to the banks, thus leading to impaired balance sheets. And in October of 1930, banks were especially weak and poorly diversified. And that led to the number of bank runs increasing exponentially in December of 1930. 352 banks failed in that single month. Mostly, they were from the Midwest, whose farmers couldn't pay back their loans from the Dust Bowl droughts. Many banks failed, causing every $3 in circulation of 1929 to have only $2 left in 1933. This led to a massive decrease in aggregate demand. People's savings were basically wiped out from the banks, and it led to them saving more money. This all stems from the danger of a centralized banking power. Essentially, everything comes down to the Federal Reserve and their disastrous policies causing the Great Depression. But could this have been stopped? Had the Fed not had such tight monetary policy, had the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act not passed, had the gold standard not been in place, and had there been tight financial regulation along with fiscal stimulus, the Great Depression may not have even happened, or at least its effects would have been greatly reduced. So in the future, it's important to remember the importance of counter-cyclical policies, such as monetary easing and fiscal stimulus to support aggregate demand. There should be financial regulation to prevent speculation and maintain stability in the financial system. There should be international cooperation to help one another. And finally, early intervention. The Fed and other government programs should nip it in the bud when it starts, instead of waiting until it gets to the point of no return. Overall, what I gather is that the Fed and the federal government's decisions are really what led to most of the Great Depression. Yes, it was also due to people being afraid to spend money and wanting to save all of their money, but ultimately the stock market crashing and the Fed's decisions after that are what led to people wanting to save their money. It's kind of tough because we see a lot of similar things going on in today's world, and that's why I think that this is a very important topic, because you never know when we might hit another Great Depression. And it's important to consider how we can avoid, having another Great Depression or any sort of depression, because nobody wants that. So I think that it's important to remember the last part, especially about what we could have done differently, what policies could be in place differently, how we got out of it through the New Deal, and what we as Americans and as voters can do to prevent another Great Depression from happening. Thank you so much.